Welcome to the Rimworld mod rundown. We'll be taking a quick look at what you can expect to see from Vanilla Factions Expanded Deserters. For starters, you'll need to own the Royalty DLC and download the additional workshop content, Vanilla Expanded Framework, Vanilla Factions Expanded Empire, and Harmony. Whilst not required, this mod does play well with Psycast Expanded due to the nature of royalty ranking benefits and some potential rewards offered by the Deserter network for your pawns. Alright, the much requested Deserter rundown, and I can understand why. This mod is a whole lot. If you haven't watched the rundown for Factions Expanded Empire, I would highly recommend doing that first, as these two mods are very interconnected and play off one another's mechanics. The footage in the background will follow a similar style to the Empire video. A full run to complete the Deserter quest chain is a huge investment and is definitely spoiled by forcing things via the dev mode. It's something that you really need to put the time and work in for. So I'll cut to footage that better explains mechanics when needed, but for the most part you'll get to see the foundation of a Deserter output happening in the background. Factions Expanded Deserters takes the small group introduced in Empire and turns it into a fully fledged joinable faction, with their own quests, rewards, risks, currency and unique events. This mod also includes a new storyteller, a new scenario, new weapons, new defensive options, a contraband market, dastardly plots, a visibility system for your schemes, multiple new structures, new shells to bombard your enemies, and new utility items to further your nefarious organisation. So let's break this overwhelming list of new things down into parts and start with the easy bits. The new storyteller is Damocles Deserter, which plays almost exclusively with doing a Deserter run, unless you're a total masochist. He works alongside a new mechanic introduced with the mod, called Visibility. The higher you keep your visibility, the more good events he will send your way. What is visibility? Don't sweat that just yet, we'll get into it. Given that his nature is to reward you for high visibility, he also punishes you for low visibility, or worse, no visibility. If you're playing as deserters and hiding or haven't joined the Deserter faction, he will only send bad events your way. If you're looking for a storyteller that really pushes you into playing aggressively as deserters, Damocles is your man. Equally, if you want a run where the events only kick you in the genitals, use him and don't join the deserters. He'll make sure that you suffer. As with most faction mods, you're also given a starting scenario. The new Safe Haven start drops you in with a ready-made bunker and all of the amenities to immediately get going with your Deserter plot. It can't all be sunshine and roses, however, so you also start with high visibility and can expect negative consequences right off the bat, from the strongest human vanilla enemy you're likely to encounter, the Empire. Okay, that's two sections that I've mentioned visibility in, so let's clear it up. Ha! Visibility is the new mechanic added for the Deserter sub-faction. It's used to represent how aware the Empire is of your operation and gates the severity of responses you can expect from them. Visibility goes from 0 to 100, with 6 tiers of severity. At its lowest, you're completely hidden. You'll be able to order contraband rewards from the comms console and have them delivered quickly, with an extremely long time granted to collect them. Yes, even more systems I haven't explained yet, don't worry, we're going to talk about this in the Deserter UI next. There are no other effects at Hidden though, the game essentially plays as normal. Between 21 and 40, you become mere whispers in the royal court, murmurs of a small uprising that many simply laugh off. Whilst the Empire don't consider you a serious threat, they are aware enough to send semi-frequent patrols to check on their sites, hoping to squash your rebellious ideals before they start to cause more serious problems. This will make your contraband drops more difficult for the Deserter network to hide, and it decreases the time you have to pick them up before somebody else might stumble across them. Moving from 41 to 60, you're now more than just words. Rumours of your deeds are spreading through the Imperial Court, with nobles increasingly annoyed that you haven't been brought to heel. You can expect strike forces rather than patrols at Imperial sites, as well as a stronger Imperial presence throughout the planet, including roaming patrols that can intercept your caravans, making world traversal risky. Whilst your rewards from the Deserter network still cost the same, you're expected to wait for the dead drop to arrive and need to pick it up faster than ever. With such a high Imperial presence on the planet, it's hard for these things to stay hidden forever. At 61 to 80, you're no longer limited to just talk between royals at court. You've made the news. Your public knowledge and the Empire are being made to look weak. This will not stand. Response times for Imperial sites are a mere 3 minutes, with Stellic guards standing ready to deploy as needed. As well as your caravans potentially being intercepted and Imperial forces growing larger, you can now expect raids twice as often from the Empire, as well as aerodrome bombardments. They know where you are and they want you dead. Equally, other deserters know how much heat you're generating, and will no longer join you via quests, afraid to work alongside such an openly confrontational cell. Your tile will not only be bombarded with explosives and bullets, but psychological warfare too, with the Empire dropping propaganda around your colony to lower your pawn's mood and certainty. The deserter network are being hampered by the Empire too, with rewards costing twice as much, taking 5 times as long to arrive, and being intercepted almost immediately. If you hit 81 to 99, the end may well be near. You are now public enemy number 1. Your name is in the newspapers, on televisions, heard over the radio, and every single Imperial wants your head on a spike. Responses at Imperial sites are near instant when they hear your name, calling in missile rain, happy to destroy their own outposts just to see you dead. Your caravans are still harassed, Imperial forces have doubled in size, raids occur from the Empire 3 times as frequently, deserters have long learned to avoid your cell, propaganda rains like confetti, absolvers silently sneak onto your tile and try to assassinate members of your group. Other factions in the world grow to despise you because of the war that you bring to the planet, and the aerodrones strafe your base, dropping bombs that decimate your colony. The deserter network only has a few operatives still willing to bring you rewards, and they demand extortionate rates, with incredibly long delivery times as they try to avoid detection, and only the smallest of opportunities to grab your dead drop once it arrives. Finally, if you hit 100 visibility, the Empire presses the button on emergency protocols. They begin the lengthy process of moving multiple orbital beam satellites into position with the intention of glassing your colony, making an example of you, not just to your world, but to all worlds. Unless you can go completely underground in 30 days' time, all the way back down to hidden, you can expect righteous fire to rain down from above and decimate what I can only imagine is the majority of the planet's surface. So, no pressure. But how do you lower your visibility? You have a few options. It naturally decays over time at a rate of 1 per day, as the Imperial leads go cold and you sink deeper into the shadows. You may also be able to take certain missions to lower your visibility through the deserter network. Equally, taking other missions is what likely raised your visibility in the first place, so this is a balancing act. I did just mention loads of things that visibility can affect, so let's work through the deserter UI and hopefully tie back to what it impacts. I'll back reference where needed, so hopefully this all clicks better. Firstly, the deserter UI is accessed via a comms console, so whilst you can pick up the fleeing deserter quest as a tribal, you won't be able to work with the network until you've got microelectronics researched. And in the meantime, you're fair game for the Empire to attack, so be careful in joining the resistance too early. The UI shows a few different things. Firstly, it shows your visibility, the thing that we just covered. Visibility affects everything as deserters, so you want to consider how it'll change before making any hasty decisions. You're given 2 forms of currency, intel and critical intel. Both of these items can spoil in their own way, as intel is only good when it's recent and relevant. As such, critical intel goes out of date in a mere 10 days, with normal intel lasting for 30. What this means is that you want to spend it before you lose it. These things aren't consumables in Elden Ring. You won't finish your game with dozens of them in your bags that you were saving for when you really needed it after you got flattened by Malenia 200 times in a row. Someone right now is feeling really called out. For the love of God, use your rune arcs. Do you have any idea how much easier that game is with the blessing of a great rune? So what can you spend intel on? Loads of things. You have a full selection of contraband with both Imperial and Deserter technology options. Imperial tech has silent neuroformers, charge weapons, a full suite of royalty-related body modifications, like coagulators, nuclear stomachs or stone skin glands. They also sell instruments, prestige armor, tech prints, royalty gear like jump packs, gun links, and non-persona variants of advanced melee weapons. Not only that, they stock gear that was added to the Empire by Expanded, like Tech Friar, Absolver, and Janissary armors, as well as the Toxblade, Charge Thumper, and the insanely powerful Fletcher, all of which were covered in the Empire Expanded rundown. The Deserters sell a bit more of an eclectic mix. You have survival meals, medicine, shells, the Deserter armor set, and other new items that are included with this mod. We'll cover those now too, as these are the only places that you're likely to see these items on offer. Firstly, you have 3 new types of shell: Shrapnel, Armor Piercing, and Cluster. Shrapnel shells work just like a mortar-fired shotgun. While lacking any armor penetration, they make up for it with sheer volume of projectile. Designed to decimate large groups of low-tech raiders or potentially injure higher tier threats, they are best suited for huge groups of stationary targets, as the scatter makes them far too unreliable for a moving conga line or smaller clusters. Armor-piercing shells are a localized nuke, with absolutely zero splash damage. They instead rely on perfectly hitting a large target to deal absolutely massive damage. They are obviously designed with something like Vanilla Vehicles Expanded in mind, as a clear counter to things like APCs or tanks, due to the sheer level of overkill that these shells pose to a human-sized enemy and the difficulty that you'll have reliably landing them on your intended target if they're only 1 tile in size. They do, however, work well in attacking stationary turrets and defensive batteries. Cluster shells are the answer to the question, what if HE shells could be fired like a chain shotgun? With less projectiles than a shrapnel shell and a much larger scatter radius, they do have the benefit of greater armor penetration and an actual blast radius upon impact. These are ideal for mid-tier raiders that would otherwise shrug off small flechettes of shrapnel shell. Best fired in unison with multiple mortars to try and spread the damage across the entire group of enemies before they start moving to attack, making it so that many collapse from blood loss before arriving at your base, or turn up so injured that they're only a single hit away from death. Another new addition with the Deserters is the ability to choose between using shells to make IEDs or the new remote charges, accessed via Imperial War Solutions research included with the mod. Whereas IEDs can sometimes disappoint due to being triggered too early by an eager raider with the jogger trait, remote charges leave the decision to you. This allows you to decide if a raid is worthy of activating your minefield or not. A bunch of tribals who are charging towards you that are already going down under a hail of turret fire and sniper shots, it'd be a waste. But that group of heavily armoured Imperial soldiers could maybe use a little softening up. Flip the switch. The incendiary options for this make a fantastic trigger option in dealing with hives. You can build an inferno casing around them, items that are designed to burn easily and for a very long time. Fully enclose the insect nest so they have nowhere to run, trigger the barbecue and simply sit back in the safety of your own base. No more running in to throw a Molotov and desperately trying to seal the cave back up before the flames die down. You have 2 new weapons with Deserters, starting with the Charge Cycler. This is somewhat of a modified Charge Thumper. Offering about as much range as the Thumper without the double shot, the Cycler has the option of swapping between the Thump projectile, which is designed to break through walls or destroy structures, or the more conventional Charge Shot, which works better against organic targets. The Charge Cyclers have a very fast aiming time, making for an ideal snapshot weapon that can pick off individual targets before they even have a chance to react, letting you fire and reposition multiple times to keep the enemy chasing you and denying them the opportunity to line up a good shot of their own. The Fletchling is the other Deserter weapon, which is a dubious modification that smashes a pump shotgun and a Fletcher rifle together, creating an acid pellet spraying close quarters murder machine. Whilst it loses the Fletcher's basically unlimited range, it gains a high projectile count that's actually intended to spread wide and hit collateral targets around the primary focus. With each flechette launched carrying a payload of the trademark acid, albeit at a lesser volume than the Fletcher rifle rounds, it allows for devastating crowd control, combining a lethal dot with huge stopping power that staggers almost all human-sized enemies. Whilst you wouldn't want this on everybody in your firing line, 2 or 3 colonists using these can keep close quarters threats under control in a way that's simply barbaric. Even if enemies ignore the stopping power, it won't be long before parts just start falling off of them. You have the option of buying a Psychic Amplifier, which is why I recommend Psycast Expanded to play alongside Empire and Deserters. Whilst you cannot use an amplifier to establish a new Psylink on a pawn, they only cost standard intel, whereas a Neuroformer requires critical. This allows you to keep pumping up the level of your caster with a more easily obtainable resource. It also means you may wish to consider spreading all of the harder to acquire Neuroformers around your colony, so everybody has a little bit of Psycasting potential. The biodecoder does exactly what it says. It decodes biocoding to let you use a scavenged weapon. This can be especially useful as the majority of Imperial raiders you'll be facing will lock their weapons down tightly. If you happen to find a great quality weapon, or even better, if you manage to down someone like an Absolver so that they don't destroy their Fletcher with the Death Certifier going off, it means you can spend normal intel to get critical intel weapons. Note that this is strictly for biocoding. Persona bonds are different and cannot be removed with this. They can also be used to open biocoded crates on certain missions, and I'll cover this when we get to that section later. The bomb pack lets you recreate the terrorism events that the Deserter faction attempts to carry out on you in Empire Expanded. Bear in mind that this item needs to be equipped as a utility and will also need to be planted before it can be detonated by selecting the item and hitting the big red button. Just make sure nobody's within an anti-grains radius of this thing, or you'll need to dig a new grave and do a funeral ritual. To make the best use of an item like this, you'll typically want support from a Psycaster or something similar, maybe genetic abilities. Things like long jumps, invisibility and skips can all help getting this into position and being able to make it back out without being killed in the process. Speaking of invisibility, you also have the utility item of an invisibility engulfer. This is basically the invisibility Psycast on demand with a short-ish cooldown. Any aggressive actions will break the invisibility field, so unfortunately you can't just walk around stabbing fools with this turned on. They are useful to keep in your inventory to swap over once you've placed a bomb pack, however. It lets you pop a cheeky sneak on the way out and get a safe distance away before blowing the place up. The last item is a Deserter Declassifier, and it's pretty specific in its use. You remember the scene from Dead Space 2?
Stick a needle in your eye.
Well, when it goes wrong anyway. This does something a little like that, with the goal being to extract intel. Now, there's definitely a break-even point with this device, so you need to be careful who you use it on. Any living noble pawn has intel rattling around in their grey matter, with more important nobles having juicier tidbits. The declassifier costs 5 intel by default. If used on a freeholder, yeoman or acolyte, you will lose intel overall. Any nobles above Baron go from normal intel to critical intel, with the High Stellarch offering 18 critical intel if jabbed in the brain with one of these. Just to give you some idea as to how valuable critical intel actually is. As you'd expect, anyone stabbed with one of these finds themselves dead. And using one of these is treated as an aggressive action, so it will anger any other faction if you decide to jab one of their members in the head. It does give you the option to bank intel in some regard, and try to work around the deterioration timer. If you can keep nobles alive in a prison, you can simply use this on them as and when you need the intel to spend. It's also a really good sync for common intel if it's close to going out of date, meaning you can get fresh intel to replace what you might have otherwise lost. If you're going to keep nobles in prison, consider relieving them of their legs to avoid any potential prison breaks that might end in their untimely demise. If you don't know how to remove the legs, quote unquote, in an ethical way, install peg legs on both the right and left side. Then you are offered the option to remove peg legs, which leaves the pawn in a more passive state. Now, as for actually ordering these items, Deserters work on a system of dead drops. The items you're ordering are, well, contraband after all. A smuggler will get the items close to your colony and let you know when it's ready to collect. The higher your visibility, the longer it'll take the smuggler to find safe passage on world, and the less time you'll have to collect. If you're happy to pay double, you can always rush the delivery and have it dropped right at your doorstep. This also removes the risk of potentially encountering the Imperial Patrol event whilst you're caravanning, which comes from high visibility, or being jumped at the drop site. The really tricky part with Deserters is timing your orders, as intel prices double above 60 visibility and absolutely skyrocket above 80. you'll want to wait for your visibility to decrease to get better offers. However, waiting too long means the intel that you're carrying will be outdated, useless, is likely to expire. It means having a trickle feed of intel isn't actually doing you that much good. It's likely keeping your visibility from getting any lower, and you're never earning enough to buy something impactful. What you want is an explosion of intel earned that rockets your notoriety up, but you can start from a safe enough position that it won't totally blow your cover for the entire operation. This is what intel scrapers are useful for. You'll need a declassifier to make one, which is another reason to keep declassifiers on hand when possible. Scrapers are a bit of a slot machine, so you will likely want to use them when your visibility is extremely low to avoid any mishaps. Pawns can intercept communications using this device, and it has a chance of providing intel or critical intel. Equally, it has a chance of increasing your visibility, or worse, alerting the Empire to your presence and summoning a raid. It only has a limited lifespan, with 10 uses before it lives up to its name and quite literally burns out, so you want these built somewhere away from flammables, fuel and ammunition. If you can keep a few of these around at a time, however, it does give you the potential to earn a quick burst of intel whilst prices are still low on the deserter network. Plus, you don't need to do all 10 draws in one go, you can stagger uses out as needed, so you're never totally starved of intel to launch missions. Just make sure you're picking up spare declassifiers if your stockpile of manila folders starts to get a little low. As well as spending intel on contraband, you can also request certain services from the deserter network. All of these obviously cost intel. You can lower your visibility, have the deserters provide you with a one-way shuttle, increase goodwill with a random faction, delay Imperial responses in a mission where it's active, taunt Imperial forces to encourage a raid, or exchange critical intel for standard intel. Whilst none of these services are particularly mind-blowing, tweaking your visibility with the inexpensive lowering service can keep you just below dangerous thresholds, and the one-way transport is always useful as an emergency getaway if you need to start on a fresh tile. As well as these services, deserters may also have leads on facilities to share, which are given in the form of quests that may increase or decrease your visibility, as well as occasionally providing you with intel and deserter appropriate rewards. Whilst these quests cost intel to unlock, you may be able to earn the price back during the attack thanks to the intel that all Imperial buildings are carrying. The quests come in a few different forms: supply depot raids, aerodrome sabotages, convoy ambushes, staging posts, control stations, tech printers and underfarms. Whilst the overall goal is normally the same, break shit, you'll find different defences and forces present on each mission, with some leaning more towards the new range of static turrets and others focusing on a mobile force of armed Imperial soldiers. These missions give you the unique opportunity to open supply crates, and if you brought a declassifier or an ex-royal pawn with you, biosecured crates, which always contain contraband items. There are a large amount of new structures that will only appear in these quests, and many can be interacted with to extract small amounts of intel, normally enough to refund the cost of acquiring the quest to begin with. You'll also find potential hazards: fuel tanks, techite disc stacks, strike buoys, battery packs, munitions crates, surveillance pillars, all of which you need to approach carefully or destroy before they pose a risk to you. This gives these quests a fantastic amount of flavour, with each Imperial outpost really looking the part. If you land at these sites with a high enough visibility, this is where the Imperial response mechanic kicks in. Generally speaking, the higher your visibility, the faster the response and the harder it's going to hit you. Going from a patrol of troopers to a strike force of janissaries, up to stellic guards, and eventually just a constant bombardment of missiles. This usually forces you to play fast and loose in these attacks, a really aggressive smash and grab, trying to scavenge as much intel as possible on the way to completing the main objective, and getting the hell out of there before backup arrives. What makes this harder to do is the new turrets. You'll get to see more of the striker turrets in Deserters, the little dudes you could summon via permit when working for the Empire. They don't require power to operate and work very similarly to mini turrets, so they're not that bad to deal with. What you'll learn to fear are the Kantarian, the Palantone, and the Onaga. These emplacements are bigger, badder, louder, and more deadly versions of standard defences. The Kantarian turret is a go-juiced uranium slug turret with the range and accuracy of a Fletcher. There is nowhere safe to stand on the map unless you have a solid wall or a mountain between you and this monster, unleashing a 55 damage shell every 3.2 seconds with insanely high AP. You'll want a shield belt, or you're likely to find colonists losing a limb every time you hear this fire. The Palantone is an enhanced autocannon, upgraded into a stack of miniguns fitted with range equal to the Fletcher as well. Whilst it doesn't hit as hard as the Kantarian, it doesn't really need to, firing in bursts of 15 with a 0.01 aiming time and a ranged cooldown of 0.03 seconds. If this starts firing, it doesn't stop until the bullets run dry. The final turret, the Anaga, is strangely the least horrifying of the bunch, with a sensible 6th burst rocket barrage over a range of 55, meaning it's something that doesn't insta-give you when you enter the map. Somewhat of a deterrent to using vehicles to charge Imperial fortifications, as it has a very low miss radius for a turret that fires AoE explosives and an even more terrifying direct hit chance of 4%. As any XCOM player knows, that means it happens all the time. So how the hell are these turrets balanced, I hear you ask? Well, they're so damn massive that their ammunition has to be stored in crates externally, right next to them. If you're crazy enough to try, it means you can bait their shots and wait for reloads to be required before moving in. Or, if you make the turret look the other way, you can have a sharpshooter take aim for the ammo and cause a chain reaction of explosive damage, right in the Imperial's defensive position. These kind of defensive setups also finally allow you to make good use of weapons like Doomsday rockets or orbital bombardment targeters. It's far more fun to actually use them rather than leave them sat in a storeroom gathering dust. Oh, and as a small bonus, you are able to build these turrets yourself with the Imperial Defences research included in the mod, just in case you ever wanted a turret battery to have the potential to kill an entire raid across the length of the map. Now what else do we have? Plots. An increasingly dangerous series of noble assassination quests that allows you to kill your way up the chain of command and choose your approach based on how much intel you're willing to spend. You have the option of raid, shoot down, or false invitation. Raid is what it sounds like. The deserters give you the location of the noble's abode and wish you luck. This is a high stakes, high intensity mission that runs the largest risk of serious injury or fatality. As such, the deserter network doesn't charge you very much for the information, as it's bad form to extort someone that clearly has a death wish. Due to the nature of leaving very few witnesses by killing an entire noble's personal guard and household, there is also very little visibility gained from this approach. After all, dead men tell no tales. Shoot down will see the deserter network take aim at the noble's personal transport, and cause a similar situation to the noble distress call of a crashing shuttle. Only this time,
I am the danger. I am the one who...
You have to venture out to the crash site and kill all remaining survivors from the crash, and hopefully take out the noble before they can retreat to safety. The deserters charge more for this service as they're having to expend resources to down a shuttle, and whilst there is still combat, it's considerably less than walking up to the noble's front door. News of a shuttle being shot down will, however, make it back to the Empire and raise their suspicions. False invitation is glorious. Arranging a noble visit to your colony with them expecting to spend a few days of exploring your throne room and gallery, getting to see the grounds and sample your finest foods, only to arrive and be completely at your mercy. Murder them, imprison them, blow them up, feed them to man-hunting animals, whatever you want. This is the most costly method, requiring critical intel rather than standard, and massively increasing your visibility. After all, the noble's last words were likely, "I can't wait to see what their household is like at the, what was it called? Traitor Island?" So you can't expect others not to know exactly what happened with your shady ass invite. And finally, you get an overhaul to a few other things included with this mod. Firstly, the initial deserter quest you'd normally receive in-game has been revamped. Accepting it will make you a part of the deserter network now too, as well as the usual permanent enemy of the Empire, yada yada yada. They sure do hold a grudge. You've now also got another variant of the quest that can appear if you are working with the Empire, a chance to turn your back on nobility and embrace the spirit of rebellion. You're rewarded for doing so by being granted additional starting intel depending on how many nobles you had in your colony and what rank they were. from a mere 1 intel for a freeholder to 350 if you decided that you were bored of being the High Stellarch. Just remember that other rewards you had from the Empire, such as titles, lands and permits, are lost too. This is a heavy sacrifice. There is one final component to Deserters, the last quest for the network, which will see you taking over a Zeus cannon installation to blast an Imperial flagship out of orbit. Obviously I am not going to show that here. Do you have any idea the kind of work you need to put in to make it that far and survive the encounter? You'll face all of the previously mentioned defense forces, turrets, bombardments, and be expected to bring everything you've got for a chance of winning. Worth it though, for the opportunity to destroy the Empire, right? And that's it folks. I've gone back and forth for a while on a bunch of this script because Deserter ties so many concepts together that it's really hard to talk about one mechanic without tripping on the toes of another, or bringing up other parts of the mod that I hadn't even started to explain yet. So I hope this rundown makes some kind of sense to you. If you're running Empire, 100% you should be running Deserters too. The play between the two factions is stellar. It might also be worth adding Imperial functionality to your mod list if you're going to play with Empire and Deserters, as it makes all of the structures that the VE team spent so long making actually have a purpose outside of looking pretty and potentially containing some intel. This comes with the massive asterisk of saying, however, these structures may eventually be worked into an actual VE mod and given mechanics then. I've heard a few rumblings on Reddit and the like that Megacorps may be doing this. Personally, I'm not sure, so take it with a pinch of salt. Just remember that if you added Imperial functionality to your mod list, yank it back out if this is the case down the line. Thanks for watching folks. If you have any mods you'd like to see a full breakdown for, or suggestions of mods you'd like to see covered, feel free to leave them in the comments, I might get around to them. I'll be back again soon with another Rimworld mod rundown. Wherever you are in the world, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon or evening. Take care.